Have you ever wondered if everything you were taught about God might be only part of the story? What if the image of the divine that most of humanity worships is not the ultimate truth, but a distorted reflection designed to keep us blind? For centuries, hidden forces and ancient powers may have shaped our understanding of the spiritual world, carefully concealing knowledge that could free the human soul. Some scholars, like Jonas, argue that the God portrayed in traditional teachings may not be the original ultimate divinity, but rather a figure that enforces rules, control, and fear, masking the deeper spiritual reality. Imagine for a moment that all your prayers, your devotion, your longing for connection might have been directed toward an incomplete vision of the cosmos. What would it mean for your faith, your purpose, and your very perception of life if this were true? The Gnostics believed that the world we see is a shadow of a greater, hidden reality, and that most people have been unknowingly worshiping a figure that is not the source of true liberation. They warned that the demiurge, a lesser divine power, has influenced humanity, keeping souls trapped in ignorance and spiritual limitation. Throughout this video, we will uncover the warning Jonas left us, exploring how Gnostic texts reveal a reality that has been suppressed for centuries. We will journey through forgotten symbols, ancient manuscripts, and interpretations that challenge conventional beliefs. By the end, you may begin to see the world and the divine in a profoundly different way. As you follow this path, ask yourself, who or what has been shaping my understanding of God? And could it be that the ultimate truth has been hidden in plain sight all along? If you are ready to question everything you thought you knew and explore the hidden truths that the church and history have often overlooked, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us as we reveal these secret teachings. Your journey into forbidden knowledge begins here, and together we will explore the mysteries that have been buried for centuries. For thousands of years, powerful institutions and systems have shaped humanity's understanding of divinity, often filtering spiritual knowledge to fit their own designs. The Gnostics saw this clearly. They believed that the truth about the divine had been obscured, buried beneath layers of ritual, dogma, and fear. According to texts discovered in Nag Hammadi and other ancient sites, early Christian leaders and philosophers intentionally minimized the role of the original, ineffable God, replacing it with a figure, the demiurge, who imposes laws and enforces obedience rather than offering true liberation. Some scholars believe this distortion was not an accident, but a deliberate strategy to control thought, belief, and even the human soul itself. These hidden teachings describe a universe far more complex than what mainstream religion presents. The material world, the Gnostics claimed, is not merely neutral or good. It is a realm influenced by forces that mislead and entrap. Humanity, in its daily devotion, has often worshipped a God that reflects human authority rather than ultimate divine wisdom. Symbols in Gnostic writings, like the archons, beings who govern the lower realms, illustrate this invisible control. They serve as metaphors for the powers that manipulate the human experience, keeping the divine spark within us veiled and unreachable unless one pursues gnosis or true knowledge. Consider the implications of this. If the deity we've been taught to worship is not the highest source of light and liberation, then many prayers, rituals, and acts of faith might have been directed toward forces that maintain limitation rather than freedom. The warning Jonas emphasizes is that accepting this distorted vision without question can keep souls in spiritual stagnation, unaware of their potential for awakening. Even now, subtle influences, cultural, religious, and societal, continue to reinforce this incomplete understanding, making it difficult to see the true source of divinity. As we explore further, ask yourself, have I ever felt a disconnect between the God I was taught to worship and the profound, often ineffable experiences of the soul? Could it be that the answers I've been searching for exist beyond conventional teachings, hidden in texts and symbols that were dismissed or suppressed? Reflect on this as we uncover the historical evidence and spiritual revelations that the Gnostics preserved, waiting for those who are ready to see. If you are following this journey, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Have you ever questioned whether the God you worship aligns with the ultimate truth? Or do you feel there is something more waiting to be discovered? Your perspective may help others awaken to questions they have never dared to ask. To understand the Gnostic warning, we must turn to the texts and discoveries that have survived the centuries, often hidden away in desert caves or lost archives. The most famous of these collections, the Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, contains writings that were deliberately excluded from Orthodox Christianity. These texts, including the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocryphon of John, and the Gospel of Truth, reveal a spiritual worldview that challenges conventional beliefs about God, creation, and the purpose of humanity. They depict a higher, unknowable divinity and contrast it with the demiurge, a lower, imperfect figure responsible for the material world. The Gnostics argued that while the demiurge appears godlike, it lacks the ultimate creative power and instead imposes limits, rules, and separation. Hans Jonas, in his studies of Gnosticism, emphasized that these ancient teachings were not mere speculation, but carefully constructed systems of spiritual understanding. He suggested that early Gnostic thinkers recognized a deliberate distortion of divine truth, propagated by religious authorities who feared that ordinary people might awaken to knowledge beyond institutional control. Symbols in these texts, such as the archons and the pleroma, serve as metaphors for forces both visible and invisible, showing a cosmos in which humans must navigate layers of illusion to reach true spiritual freedom. For the Gnostics, gnosis the personal, experiential knowledge of the divine was the only path to liberation, and it could not be granted by external institutions. Consider the implications of this discovery. Entire generations have been guided toward worshiping a figure that enforces obedience rather than reveals ultimate truth. The Gnostics saw the material world as a trap for the divine spark within every individual, and they meticulously recorded practices, meditations, and interpretations to awaken those capable of seeing beyond the veil. Some scholars believe that the suppression of these texts and teachings was systematic, designed to protect power structures and maintain a limited vision of God. It was, in effect, an ancient censorship of spiritual truth. As we examine these discoveries, ask yourself, what would it mean to access a level of divine knowledge that was intentionally hidden for centuries? Could your perception of faith, prayer, and spiritual purpose change if you realized that the God you were taught to worship is not the ultimate source, but a figure who keeps the true divine hidden? Reflect on this and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you feel there are layers of truth that have been withheld from humanity, waiting to be uncovered by those bold enough to seek them? Throughout history, the Gnostics believed that certain institutions, authorities, and even unseen powers worked to conceal the ultimate spiritual reality from humanity. According to their teachings, the Church and other organized systems of religious control emphasized obedience, fear, and dogma over personal awakening. By presenting the demiurge, the lower, law-imposing God, as the ultimate divinity, these systems directed devotion toward a figure that maintains control rather than liberation. Some scholars argue that this was not only a spiritual distortion, but also a social and political strategy. Keeping people spiritually dependent ensured that hierarchies and power structures remained unchallenged. Symbols in Gnostic texts help explain how this distortion operates. The archons, for example, are described as rulers or forces that influence the material world, keeping human consciousness limited and unaware of its higher potential. They are not necessarily evil in the conventional sense, but they act as gatekeepers to the truth, creating distractions, illusions, and attachments that prevent individuals from experiencing gnosis. In effect, humanity has been worshiping a figure of authority rather than the unknowable, transcendent God that Gnostic texts describe. Hans Jonas warned that failing to recognize this distortion keeps the soul bound to the material realm, making spiritual awakening rare and challenging. The consequences of this suppression are still visible today. Many of the spiritual practices, rituals, and beliefs that claim to connect us with God may unknowingly reinforce the demiurge's influence rather than reveal the higher reality. The teachings that could guide a person towards self-realization and connection with the ultimate divinity were often labeled heretical, hidden, or destroyed. It is as if humanity has been walking in a hall of mirrors, seeing reflections of truth while the genuine light remained obscured. The Gnostics called this the forgetting of the soul, a state where humans accept limitations imposed by forces that are themselves bound by ignorance of the higher God. Ask yourself, how much of your own understanding of God has been shaped by what society, tradition, or authority tells you, rather than personal experience or insight? Could it be that the true divinity you seek has been waiting for your recognition, while the figure most people worship acts as a veil over that truth? Share in the comments your thoughts. Have you ever sensed a disconnect between conventional teachings and the profound experiences you've had of the sacred? Hidden within the ancient Gnostic texts lies a profound truth that has the power to radically shift humanity's understanding of God and the universe. The Gnostics taught that the ultimate divinity is not the demiurge who governs rules and worldly authority, but a higher, unknowable God, an infinite source of light, consciousness, and freedom. This God is not concerned with judgment or punishment, but with awakening the divine spark that resides within every individual. The texts speak of the pleroma, a realm of fullness and ultimate reality, where the true divine essence exists beyond time, space, and human perception. Some scholars believe that the very act of awakening to this knowledge is an act of rebellion against centuries of imposed limitations. It is as if a hidden doorway has been waiting for each of us to step through, revealing a universe far richer and more mysterious than the one presented by conventional teachings. Consider the symbolism of the archons once again. These forces, which maintain the illusion of separation and control, can only operate when humanity remains ignorant of the higher reality. The moment an individual achieves Gnosis' true experiential knowledge of the divine, their perception of life transforms. Fear, blind obedience, and the sense of powerlessness dissolve, replaced by clarity, purpose, and freedom. Hans Jonas emphasized that this awakening is not theoretical. It is a lived, transformative experience. The revelation the Gnostics preserved is that divinity is within us, and it has always been there, quietly awaiting recognition. The demiurge and its controlling forces are no match for a soul that has glimpsed the higher truth. This forgotten revelation also connects deeply to the present. Every time we unquestioningly accept a limited image of God or follow spiritual routines that do not awaken insight, we reinforce the same patterns that have kept humanity blind for millennia. Yet, each step toward Gnosis, whether through reflection, study, or spiritual experience, breaks the chain of ignorance. The Gnostics left us not just warnings, but practical guidance, inner contemplation, understanding of symbols, and recognition of divine sparks are the keys to liberation. Even today, people who awaken to this knowledge report a sense of profound peace, an intimate connection to life, and a freedom that transcends fear and societal expectations. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, could it be that the limitations you felt in your spiritual life are not a personal failure, but the result of centuries of hidden forces shaping perception? And if the true God is waiting within, what would it mean to finally recognize that spark, to see beyond the veil of control and limitation? Take a moment to consider this, and share your thoughts in the comments. What does it feel like to imagine a divinity that is not bound by judgment, fear, or imposed rules, but is entirely devoted to awakening your soul? The answer may not come all at once, but the very act of questioning is the first step toward liberation. The hidden truths preserved by the Gnostics are far more than relics of an ancient past. They are mirrors, reflecting the spiritual reality that continues to shape our lives today. If humanity has been unknowingly worshiping a figure that enforces control, obedience, and limitation rather than liberation, then much of our spiritual struggle is not a personal flaw, but a reflection of centuries of misdirection. Feelings of fear, guilt, anxiety, or inadequacy may not originate from our own shortcomings, but from the way the demiurge's influence has been subtly woven into the structures, teachings, and rituals passed down through generations. Hans Jonas emphasized that awakening to this understanding is not rebellion. It is an act of insight, a courageous step toward reclaiming the soul's freedom, recognizing the distinction between the lower, controlling divinity, and the true, unknowable God opens a door to a life where faith becomes intimate and conscious, rather than blind and constraining. In our modern world, the effects of these distortions are still visible. Many spiritual practices, religious institutions, and social norms subtly reinforce patterns that keep the human soul in limitation. People devote their energy, time, and devotion to routines and doctrines that may not connect them to the ultimate source of life. The Gnostics saw this clearly. Without direct experience of gnosis, the personal, transformative knowledge of the divine humanity remains trapped, unable to access the fullness of its spiritual potential. Symbols and myths that once guided the soul toward awakening have been misinterpreted or hidden, leaving seekers to navigate a confusing maze of partial truths. The challenge is not merely to believe differently, but to perceive differently, to attune oneself to the inner light that the demiurge cannot contain or control. This awakening is not abstract. It manifests in every aspect of life. When a person begins to recognize the higher God beyond limitation, fear no longer dominates decision-making, doubt no longer governs faith, and the sense of disconnection dissolves. Daily experiences take on new depth and clarity, as if a veil has been lifted, and the world suddenly reveals layers of meaning previously unnoticed. Even the mundane work, relationships, personal struggles becomes infused with sacred significance. The realization that divinity is not external, but a living presence within the soul, transforms perception and action, giving every choice a subtle spiritual weight. It is in this transformation that the Gnostic revelation proves its power. Liberation is not promised by institutions, but achieved through personal insight, reflection, and courage. Consider your own life now. Have you ever felt moments where the divine seemed present, yet distant from the structures of worship and authority you were taught to trust? Could it be that these fleeting experiences are whispers from the higher God, calling your soul to awaken from centuries of imposed limitation? The Gnostics urged us to notice these moments, to recognize them as invitations, not anomalies. By doing so, we take responsibility for our own spiritual journey, reclaiming a path that has been hidden, suppressed, and distorted for millennia. Every insight, every question, every moment of reflection becomes an act of liberation, breaking the invisible chains that have bound human consciousness for centuries. Now, imagine the implications of this understanding extending beyond your own life. If the divine spark exists within each person, untouched by the demiurge's influence, then humanity as a whole is capable of awakening in ways that defy centuries of control. The very act of questioning, reflecting, and seeking gnosis becomes a form of resistance against spiritual stagnation, a way to honor the courage of those who preserve these hidden teachings at great personal risk. Every time we challenge what we've been told, every time we contemplate the true nature of God, we participate in a timeless struggle to restore humanity's access to its divine potential. Ask yourself now, how much of your spiritual life has been influenced by what others told you to believe versus what you have discovered through your own inner reflection? Could the limitations you feel, the moments of frustration or doubt, be the subtle echo of the demiurge's influence? And if the ultimate God is waiting within, ready to awaken your soul, what steps can you take today to recognize that presence, to nurture it, and to live in alignment with its truth? Share your reflections in the comments. By doing so, you are not only acknowledging your own awakening, but participating in a community of seekers dedicated to uncovering and preserving these hidden truths. Your engagement is a living testament to the power of gnosis, and a step toward a collective recognition of the divine that has always been closer than you imagined. As we reach the end of this journey, the revelation becomes clear. The God humanity has worshipped for centuries may not be the ultimate source of light and liberation, but a reflection of limitation designed to keep souls in ignorance. The Gnostics and thinkers like Jonas remind us that true divinity is beyond judgment, beyond fear, and beyond control. It resides within each of us, waiting for recognition, waiting for the moment we dare to look past the demiurge's shadow and awaken to the infinite. This is not a rejection of faith, but an invitation to deepen it, to move from ritualistic obedience to conscious, experiential understanding. By embracing this truth, we reclaim the freedom that has always been our birthright, the freedom to know, to perceive, and to live in alignment with the divine spark that animates the cosmos. Think of this as more than knowledge. It is a call to awaken, to engage with the hidden realities that have been deliberately veiled for centuries. Every insight you gain, every question you ask, every reflection you share becomes a step toward liberation, both for yourself and for others who are still searching. This is why your participation matters. Leaving a comment, sharing your perspective, liking the video, or subscribing to the channel is not a trivial act. It is a way of keeping alive the memory of these hidden truths, of joining a community of seekers committed to unveiling what has been obscured. Together, we honor the courage of those who preserved these teachings and continue the work of awakening humanity's consciousness. Ask yourself, what would it mean to live your life guided by the ultimate God rather than the figure of limitation? How might your decisions, relationships, and purpose transform if you truly recognized the divine spark within yourself? Could the small, persistent questions you have carried all these years be the first hints of Gnosis, calling you toward a fuller understanding of reality? The journey does not end here. It begins anew with every reflection, every inquiry, and every act of awareness. Continue to question, to explore, and to seek, knowing that the path toward the true divine is both personal and profound, and that every step taken in pursuit of this awakening honors the hidden wisdom of those who came before us. By engaging with these truths, you are not merely consuming information, you are participating in a timeless process of liberation, one that has the power to transform your perception of life, faith, and the universe itself. What secrets will you uncover next, and how will they change the way you understand the divine? The answers are waiting, just beyond the veil, ready for those brave enough to seek them.